What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So we've been watching the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X sell out all over the place. Very difficult to find one of these at retail price and not at a price marked up at least twice as much by scalpers online, but I've been curious about any kind of sales data that we can get from either company announcing some sort of milestone that they've passed. Nothing there yet in terms of hard data, but we knew we were going to be getting information out of Japan in terms of the sales for these systems, and we now have them for the first week of each system in Japan. We'll go over that here today. Also, those mystery SKUs in GameStop system for the Switch appear to be returning now, with some of those appearing online, and we'll go over if that really means much and what some of them even could be. Oh, and the Game Awards announced the Game of the Year nominees, and wouldn't you know it, it caused some controversy online. Who'd have thought? Guys, if you enjoyed these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if brand new here, hit the red subscribe button down below. And we're going to start today with that Capcom leak. If you remember, we talked about this previously in a Newswave video where Capcom had a bunch of information about a terabyte stolen by a hacking group, and it was held at ransom. Capcom refused to pay. So now it looks like things are just being leaked online. About 60 gigabytes so far has been put out there with all kinds of interesting things that's been planned. But it looks like in the latest leak, Street Fighter 6 is being mentioned, and it appears to be an email talking about 3D modeling. But the point that people are really looking at are the systems and platforms that it would be releasing on. We don't even know when this thing's coming out. There was a rumor that it was pushed back because it wasn't up to quality standards for a Street Fighter game, so who knows about release date or any of that, but it doesn't look like it's going to be just a PlayStation game any longer, as all kinds of systems, which includes the Xbox One, the PS4, the Series X, the Series S, PC, and PlayStation 5 are all mentioned here. So it looks like it's just going to release on a bunch of different systems. It's going to be multi-plat once again, and seemingly not just on the PlayStation and PC. Remember before, Sony showed up with a bunch of money and basically funded the game, and it stayed with Sony on the PlayStation for the rest of the way. So interesting to see this, that it's also going to be a cross-gen game on the Xbox One and the PS4 to follow with current gen now. I mean, I guess it's released, the PS5 is released in Europe now, so it's definitely current gen now. Also, we did get reviews releasing for Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. This is one I was curious about because it is a Warriors game first and foremost, and well, it currently at the time of this recording has a 79 Metascore, and that is across 58 critic reviews. But as I was looking through these reviews, it kept coming up some that it was repetitive because yes, it is a Warriors game, there's a lot of grinding, but it is a longer game because of that. Some are saying like 50, 60 hours just to do most of the stuff really in it. But from what I could tell, the review scores were all over the place. Some were giving like a 4, others were giving a 10, and everything in between there. So a lot of varying opinions on this, and it really seems to come down to your tolerance for the Warriors formula, as I would call it. Big hack and slash, a lot of grinding, and a lot of different characters to kind of build up, and weapons to collect, and all of this. So that's what it really comes down to. But I think a lot of people have already made up their mind because the Breath of the Wild lore is attached to this game. So if you want to find out what happened with the Calamity Wars, you're probably getting this game so you can see it play out in front of you, even if you have to grind through a bunch of the Warriors style game. Either way, I'll be picking this one up on Friday, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it quite a bit on the Spawncast this Saturday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. Oh, and there's been a lot of talk about the PlayStation 5 DualSense controller, and to me, it's like the most next-gen thing about the PlayStation 5 right now. There's a lot of stuff going on with that controller, but we've heard about the advanced haptic feedback quite a bit, and it turns out the same company that worked with Nintendo for their HD Rumble also worked with Sony and PlayStation for the PS5's advanced haptic feedback in their DualSense controller, and this is good for a few reasons. One, it means the company that's been working on this and advancing the technology has contracts with both Nintendo and Sony, so that would mean that they probably have a reason to continue advancing this technology forward at a rapid pace, so that's really cool to see. And two, that means that it's basically the same kind of technology between them, that companies will be able to work with third-party companies in particular for their games. I think that's one of the reasons we haven't seen the Switch's HD Rumble used as much by third-party companies for some interesting ideas, because PlayStation and Microsoft, the Xbox One and the PS4, was still using like the older style rumble. So at this time, Microsoft needs to get on board with this advanced haptic feedback. I don't know if they get a new controller out there, an Elite controller, or they just maybe advance their Xbox controller a bit more this generation coming up. Well, we'll see, but really good to see that Immersion has really got both contracts now, and I guess they'll continue working through some of this technology. Who knows what the future will hold for some of these controllers coming up. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with the Xbox Series S and X and PlayStation 5 and the sales in Japan. We knew we were going to get some hard numbers for these systems from Famitsu because they do that every week. We generally will find out about games. They release them in a nice little chart. It's kind of made up online, and we can compare all of the sales numbers. And while we're still waiting for all of the data to come out, we do have a release for the next-gen platforms and how they did in Japan, and we can even go back and compare them to some of the other platform releases like the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4. Now, the first thing to note here with these systems, Microsoft and Sony did a worldwide release, which includes Japan and the West and the US and all of this. Normally, or at least what they've done previously in the past, they would release in the West, and then they would release in Japan, especially with the PS4 and the Xbox One. The PS4 released in the West, and then 3 months later in February, it came out in Japan. However, with Microsoft and the Xbox One, came out in November, and then it took 10 months to get to Japan. So that was a bit of a wait on that end, and most people had picked up a PS4, or at least decided on that platform at that time. It was gonna be cheaper anyway, and it was Sony, so naturally they probably already made up their mind there, and maybe that's what Microsoft was figuring. But let's go over here to Gamatsu, who had the translations from Famitsu, going over some of the numbers, which starts with the PlayStation 5, sold 118,085 units in its first 4 days in Japan. That's November 12th to 15th. And the Xbox Series X and Series S sold 20,534 units in its first 6 days, November 10th to 15th. Now, if we go back and compare that, just as an example, to the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, the PlayStation 4 sold 322,083 in its first 2 days, and the Xbox One sold 23,562 in its first 4 days. So, the biggest thing here to recognize, those systems all sold out here, that being the S, the X, and the PS5. Everything that Sony and Microsoft sent appears to have sold through, and now they have some crazy amount of demand, even for the Xbox, seemingly, which is interesting because they're running lotteries, how they will do that at the retail stores, just to give you a chance to get one of these systems. Now, it's pretty clear the PS5 is more popular than the Xbox in Japan. I mean, I think we all figured that was gonna happen after what happened with the Xbox One, but let's say the Series X or the S, because the S at least has the price advantage, can continue selling at a decent pace. There's a chance that they could improve on the Xbox One's lifetime sales in Japan in like the first 6 or 7 months. That would be a big improvement for the Series X and the S, and actually give Microsoft some momentum in that region as we see Sony kind of shift their focus towards the Western audience. That has to be an opportunity that Microsoft is starting to recognize right now. Now, the biggest reason for the PlayStation 5 really selling less than the PS4 did in its debut is because we're seeing a worldwide launch here from Sony. They didn't wait 3 or 4 months to build up stock to then show up to Japan with a ton of PlayStation 5 systems, and based on the lotteries and everything they're doing right now with retail stores, it appears that demand is still sky high for the PlayStation 5. So it's not like, oh wow, no one really bought a PS5 compared to the PS4. No, they sold out of them. They have to wait to get more stock now. However, I will note it does seem like Sony may have been pushing more of their stock to the West. And as I said before, they seem to be kind of shifting focus away from Japan, but I mean, let's face it, at this time, Nintendo pretty much runs Japan, as you can see with the sales charts that we look at every now and then here. It's not even close at times right now. The Switch generally will have most of the top 10 for the different games and always sells like 100,000 Switch systems minimum every week. Now, as for some of the games, Spider-Man Miles Morales was the top-selling PlayStation 5 game. That's at 18,640 units. And then Demon's Souls sold 18,607 units. They're almost within the they're within the margin of error basically right there. But Demon's Souls, I didn't think was going to be a massive mainstream appeal type game. It just, Spider-Man makes more sense, but that is a cross-gen game. I mean, the real big exclusive, I guess, that Sony is pushing for the PS5 is Demon's Souls, and while I'm playing it, and I have, of course, the love-hate relationship we all do with these Souls games, I'm still having a blast with it. It's super rewarding when you finally beat one of the demons or the big bosses or any of that, and visually, it's amazing looking. Throw it in performance mode, it looks good enough, and it's this fluid 60 frames per second, so good stuff there. But now we get to look towards Sony trying to fill stock and really where the roof is now for the PlayStation 5. But so far, so good for both companies. Even Microsoft, you know what? I think the Series X and the Series S are going to absolutely trounce the Xbox One sales overall, and a lot of it's going to have to do with some decisions that Phil Spencer has made already, and maybe going into the future. He keeps talking about having a focus on that region. Let's see him prove it this generation. Next up, let's talk about the Game Awards and their Game of the Year nominees. Now, there are a lot of categories. It would take quite a while to go through them, and I'm sure we'll talk about it on the podcast this weekend. We'll even try to pick winners and make some predictions there, but I wanted to just mostly cover the Game of the Year category because that's the big one that a lot of people really care about. Let's go over here to the slide that they put out showcasing the 6 different games that will be part of the Game of the Year category for all of the voting. And starting from the left, we have Animal Crossing New Horizons. That's actually really cool to see that in there. I kind of thought it might get passed up, but I mean, it's the best-selling first-party game this year. It had a good Metacritic score. I mean, it's pretty much got to go in there. Doom Eternal, which is another one that I was a little surprised about, but good to see that there. Final Fantasy VII Remake, Ghost of Tsushima, Hades made its way. This is really cool, by the way, to see Hades. Reminds me of when Celeste got nominated, but Hades is a great game, so it makes a lot of sense for me anyway, to see that there. And then The Last of Us Part 2. I'm gonna let you kind of look at this here and tell me which game you think is causing controversy right now. Yep, I think we're gonna be going back through that Last of Us Part 2 controversy. We're reliving that all over again because of the Game Awards. Oh, let's take a quick look. We did have a listing of the number of nominations between different games. You can see that here that was released by the Game Awards over on Twitter, with the leading game being Last of Us Part 2 with 10 nominations, but look what's number 2. That's Hades with 8 nominations. Wow. Hades really made an impact this year. That's really cool to see. And then we have Ghost of Tsushima with 7 nominations, Final Fantasy VII Remake with 6 nominations, Half-Life Alyx with 4, which, by the way, is the one snub for Game of the Year. I'm a little surprised about. I thought Half-Life Alyx might be like the first big VR game to have a shot at Game of the Year, but it's VR, and unfortunately not enough people probably experienced it to really get it there, but either way. Then we have Doom Eternal with 4 nominations, and then Fall Guys with 4. Okay, so which game do we think is going to win Game of the Year? And that's what I'm curious about for you. Let me know in the comments which one here you think will win and which one you think should win, because there's 2 different distinctions there, isn't there? So the one that I think will win is probably going to be Last of Us Part 2. Look, I know there's a lot of controversy around it. A lot of people didn't like the story necessarily, but if you really sit down and look at the game, the cinematography is high quality, the visuals are great, animation, storytelling, the ability to do all of that was good. I just thought the gameplay was mostly average and the story just didn't click with me as much as it did with other people. The game that I want to win is Ghost of Tsushima, and that's the one I'd be voting for, is Ghost of Tsushima. So hopefully that is the case, but you know what would be really interesting is if neither of them win and they just gave it to Animal Crossing, because those would be the interesting reactions online if out of all of this, it ended up being Animal Crossing that took home the Game of the Year award. Oh, also let me know which game you think should be in the Game of the Year running here, like which one just missed out completely that you don't really get. Half-Life Alyx is probably the one for me, but then again, it is a VR game. However, that is a game that really opened up a lot of people's eyes to VR. They just had to be convinced to try it. Next up, let's talk about some mystery Switch SKUs that seem to pop up every now and then in the GameStop system, and they're usually shared online. Someone takes a picture of the computer screen or something. SKUs stand for stock keeping units, and a lot of times they'll pop up when different listings show up from wholesalers. It could be automatic, and a lot of times they'll kind of hide the title, and then they'll also usually just throw like a random release date. but sometimes the pricing is actually pretty close. However, they can be kind of thrown off a bit. Could be a collector's edition as an example, but let's take a look here. This is in a tweet put out by JP Switch Mania, and you can see a listing of several different stock keeping units in the GameStop computer system. And I double checked, just asked a few contacts, and yeah, it does appear that there are these available SKU listings in the GameStop system right now. However, I have been through this before where they were in the system before this and then they were updated and a few were put in, but not all of them. So there's a chance that not all of these are like brand new, but you can see most of them say pre-order. We have a range of different SKU pricing as well, up to $110 there. And then we have one that's like 40 and 60. You know what? I'm looking at this and it does kind of line up with us hearing about The World Ends With You getting some sort of announcement. I mean, that's kind of what I'm looking at here. I bet you one of these is this World Ends With You sequel that we've been talking about. It's been hinted at, rumored. But really, now everyone's wondering, could Nintendo have something in December? Would that make sense for them to do that? I mean, I guess technically they'd be done with Age of Calamity. That would be out, and maybe they want to start setting up 2021 since they've had some time now to kind of work out how that's going to be, and they have pushed some games out of 2020 into 2021, so maybe they're looking to set up their roadmap a bit earlier than we would expect, where usually we're thinking January, and then maybe they just do it in December just to get everything ready to go for the holidays even. But hey, let me know what you guys think about this, because it's also very possible that these popped up well in advance of when we would have any type of announcement, and it could still be that January direct that we always expect from Nintendo. But I mean, this whole past year has been in flux, so who really knows anymore with Nintendo and when they're ready to announce anything. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Persona 5 Scramble, because people have been very curious as to when this game was finally going to get localized and brought west, and there was some concern when Koei Tecmo all of a sudden removed the mention of them localizing it and bringing it to the west with a Western release that was planned from their quarterly financial results that they did announce in a report. But it does look like there's at least some movement around a Western release. You can see this headline here from Persona Central. Asian retailers list English version of Persona 5 Scramble, The Phantom Strikers for 2021 release. In fact, right now, several of those retailers are listing a February 23rd, 2021 release. The listings are for a Region 3 English release, which is a release for the Southeast Asian market. However, what's interesting about this, as pointed out by Persona Central, when Persona 5 Royal received a Region 3 English release, that coincided with the game's Western localization. So that would place the localization about a year after it released in Japan. So that would at least make some sense. I'm curious why Koei Tecmo would have just removed it from their financial report then. Hard to say on that end there, but I would be shocked if this game never got a localization, because, I mean, Persona is now getting into the mainstream just about. Like, when Persona 6 gets announced, I would be shocked if it's not multi-plat and they just brought it everywhere, because it seems like Persona, which started super obscure on the PlayStation 1 way back in the day, has really built up a massive following, and when Persona 5 got nominated for Game of the Year, really broke through with some heavy sales as well. So yeah, Persona 5 Scramble, I would be shocked if it's not localized like beginning of next year. And it seems like right now, retailers being alerted by their suppliers are getting ready for it. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Storm saying, I'm already starting to get Age of Calamity spoilers in my recommendations. So that is the biggest issue I think with YouTube right now, is if you're really into the build up to a game, Age of Calamity as an example, and you're searching a lot of Age of Calamity preview stuff, a lot of talks about kind of getting people caught back up on the story, predictions and all this, all of a sudden YouTube might start recommending to you early gameplay of it from people who have hacked their Switch and the game leaked out and they downloaded it, or just full-on boss battles of like the end of the game, and wouldn't you know it, the final boss is like the thumbnail or something, and you see it, and that's it, it's spoiled. That is the biggest problem right now is YouTube, is the recommendation of thumbnails that are spoilers. So I don't know if YouTube can ever do anything about that. Maybe blur out a thumbnail if it's marked as spoiler, but then you also have to rely on the person creating the content to mark it as a spoiler, and they probably wouldn't want their thumbnail to be blurred anyway. I don't know, that's a whole thing to figure out on its own, and once you see it, that's it. You just look at the front of YouTube and you're like, well, all right, that's spoiled for me. So even YouTube, nothing's safe right now, but there's only like another day, so you just gotta make it like another 24 to 48 hours, and there you go, you'll finally have Age of Calamity in your hands, and you can check out the Calamity Wars for yourself. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. Enjoyed this video, guys, hit the like button, it really helps out. If not, hit the dislike, leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today, whether it's the Xbox Series S and X and PlayStation 5 sales in Japan. Were you surprised at the number that was reported for either systems? Let me know about that. And then what about those mystery Switch SKUs? Do you want to go ahead and give some predictions down below? You can. And then which game is going to take home the trophy for Game of the Year? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.